Hi, my name's Jason. I'm from the University of Texas at Austin, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Decimal Intervention Tracker. The Decimal Intervention Tracker was designed as a small group intervention. However, you can utilize it however you see fit. The way I like to use it is by identifying students who require small group intervention for decimals. And the way I do it is for the students who I identify, I print out a decimal intervention tracker for each student. This tracker is going to hold all the mental load for each student for you. It's very challenging when you're working with so many different students to keep track of all the different areas of need for your students. And so this tracker is designed to do that for you. Looking at it in more detail, the way this intervention tracker is designed, that it starts from less complex concepts and builds in complexity throughout. And we'll talk about this in a little more detail. But just big picture, when you're using this with your students, I'll call them to my desk and they'll come with their intervention tracker, and I'll have them work either with a mini whiteboard or with a pencil and a notebook. Students don't have to start from the beginning. It's really up to you to determine where you think they should start along this tracker. And so if you're looking at C, you can see that section C is focusing on adding tenths. And so if you find that your student already knows how to do that, then you might want to start them with subtracting tenths. However, if you feel like the student is having difficulty at the focus area, then you can always move them back to an area where you feel that is best for them. But once you've determined where to start, then they can progress through the intervention tracker, moving along as you see fit. Just kind of diving into it, when you look at the first page, we're focusing on fourth grade standards, and it really just starts with students reading decimals, being able to read them precisely. We don't want students saying 0.7, we want them saying 7/10, and we want them to use that language. The same thing with 1 and 4/10. That and is the key, that there is a decimal there. And so just as a teacher, it's also helpful to keep in mind that when we're saying larger numbers like 134, that we're avoiding saying 134, because the and is supposed to signify that there's a decimal there. As students move to B, then we're working on getting them to visualize decimals, and so we can use place value discs, base 10 blocks, decimal squares, as well as place value mats to help support their visual understanding of what's going on with fractions. With A and B, you can kind of work with these simultaneously as well. But once we get kind of further into it, we're really moving into adding tenths and subtracting tenths without regrouping, and then adding and subtracting tenths with regrouping. Moving along the next page, when we move from G to M, we're working with hundredths, and it follows the same progression as that first page with tenths, except we're adding in hundredths. When you start looking more closely at each section, you can see that there's like a progression even within each section. So if you look at I, that students are adding hundredths, and then we're also including numbers with tenths and hundredths, and then we're bringing the application of money into that once they're working with hundreds. That application of money is great. I find that a lot of my students, when we work with money, that they bring in a lot of prior knowledge with that, and it's a great application of decimals for them to see it being used in everyday life. And so as it progresses through, it gets more complex, and then students are going to be adding and subtracting hundredths with and without regrouping. And then finally at the end is the spiral review. And this is really just having them work, reviewing the different concepts that they've been progressing through. I think one thing to keep in mind is you don't have to wait to the end to do the spiral review. Depending on the amount of time it's taking for students to progress through, you might want to add in spiral review throughout, so that once you feel like students are building that understanding and that knowledge, bringing their prior knowledge and what they've learned from earlier progressions to the forefront will help them sort of retain that learning, so that when you do eventually get to the end with that spiral review, it doesn't feel like they've learned, it doesn't feel like that learning has been lost. As we move further into the decimal intervention tracker, when we get to the 5th grade standards, that's where we see multiplication and division of decimals occurring. It follows, once again, a similar format as adding and subtracting, but it does progress slightly different. So looking at it in more detail, you can see that students start by multiplying tenths and hundredths by whole numbers. And we really want to emphasize the idea of the visual models of showing that when we have 2 times 3/10, that we're really showing them that's 2 groups of 3/10, which we can see in that visual model. And then moving to the algorithm, whether it's the standard algorithm or the whatever algorithm you find that you want to be working on with them, this will help support that as well. They'll also be multiplying with hundredths. And then another reminder is just keeping, another great visual is the number line. It's critical that students understand the size or the magnitude of decimals, and a number line is a great way for them to see basically what is the size, how big is 3/10 compared to 1 whole. And we can use number lines when we're adding, subtracting, as well as multiplying and dividing. In the example here, you can see we have 5 times 2/10 or 5 groups of 2/10, and you can see those jumps of 2/10 on the number line. And then as we progress into multiplying with hundredths, we're also throwing in problems where students are looking at examples with money as well. At the end of 5th grade standards, you see that students are going to be multiplying decimals by decimals. And in this, the area model is one of the visuals that we can use to help support this understanding. One of the big ideas of multiplying decimals by decimals is that the numbers no longer become greater. The value becomes less. So students are used to seeing that 3 times 4 is 12, that 12 is a greater number than 3 and 4. But when we multiply 3/10 by 4/10, now we have not 12/10 but 12 hundredths. And 12 hundredths is smaller than both of those factors. And that is a confusing concept for students. So using an area model can help support this understanding for students to see why the product of 3/10 and 4/10 becomes smaller. And then finally, we have that spiral review to help kind of mix up the problems. We don't want students to see too many of the same problems over and over and over again. We want them to do that to build their understanding when they're acquiring that new knowledge. But as they start to build that fluency, we want to start mixing up the problems so it doesn't become too robotic for them, and they're able to identify the differences between the problems and really have to think critically about what strategies to use when they see them. What you'll see at the end of the intervention tracker is this section where there's a date and minutes, focus, and notes. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what that section's for and how you can utilize this to make the most out of your intervention times with your students. So one way to use this is, this is an example here, is on April 2nd, I worked with a student for 30 minutes and they were working on Focus C. And on the first day they came and we were working on adding decimal numbers to the 10th place. And I quickly realized that they needed to review place value. And so I made a note of that. So when they came to me the next day, we worked for 30 minutes in our intervention session and we reviewed place value with base 10 blocks. And so then the next day, once they had learned and built that understanding of place value, they were able to apply it to Focus C, which was adding numbers to the 10th place. And they did 4 problems correctly in a row. And so now what I might do is have that student go to Focus D. And so as you can see, this intervention tracker can work as holding that mental load for you, and each student will have their own intervention tracker, so you can make these notes for each student and it really help you keep track of what's going on and without any extra planning or time on your part. I'd like to point you to the Spiral website where you can access the Decimal Intervention Tracker, and I'd also like to thank IES for providing the funding for us being able to develop these resources for you, as well as providing these videos. Thank you.